TitleMatchNetwork.com.
Welcome to another edition of the RF Video Shoot interview series. Today we're joined by none other than a true legend in the sport of professional wrestling, Colonel Debeers. Thanks for being here today with us.
First thing I want to say is, as you were, sit back, relax, and you will be enlightened during the next session.
My first question to you would be, is it true that you played pro football?
Hell no. I lasted as long as a fart in a windstorm. That was propagated by a promoter who thought that, someone who played pro football would obviously, add some credibility to wrestling. I did have the opportunity to play, but I wasn't good enough, plain and simple. I had the opportunity after that to go play Canadian football with a former wrestler named George Wells. But again, at that time, the money wasn't there as far as I was concerned. And you could be traded and playing for one team, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers one night, and somebody in Vancouver the next.
When did you become interested in pro wrestling?
Never. And I guess probably the answer to that would be after I felt, when I was playing college football, that I would have a distinguished career in the NFL, and it didn't come to pass. And so I went back to my hometown, and I had been approached when I was in college by this promoter. And what about pro wrestling? At that point, I just wasn't interested. But once I went back and I said, Jesus Christ, you're teaching school and you're not doing anything. You're not making any money. I went back to that old Greek promoter and I said, tell me about this wrestling. Can I make good money? Can I see the world? Can I do whatever? And of course, right. I took the opportunity.
How did you get started in the business?
How did I get started in the business? Well, again, I was teaching school at the time, so I would work out with various wrestlers whenever they had the opportunity to give me the time. I always had a Friday night once the ring was set up in my hometown to work out with wrestlers. Anywhere from a very notable wrestler named Kay Noble, who was a female wrestler, and then I did a lot of training at a place with Lord Littlebrook and his midgets. Even though you couldn't do the physical aspect, Lord Littlebrook definitely taught me a lot about the psychological aspect of wrestling and what to expect.
Right. Was the training more difficult than you thought?
No.
Can we actually shut the air off? Just because I don't want the noise interfering with the camera. Sorry about that.
That's all right, as long as you're going to edit it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
There might be a button you want to see.
Yeah, I'm looking for a button. I got it hot to cold to hot. Yeah, now it's hot. Why the fuck did you do that?
There's one that's a stop.
Oh. Jesus, so cool.
All right, cool. Sorry.
Okay.
All right, we were talking about the training. Was it more? How do you?
I need to? Are you focused again, or?
I'm ready.
No, I mean, is the camera focused?
Yeah. Yep. You're perfect.
Okay, because I moved.
You're in frame.
Okay.
We were talking about the training.
Yeah, I mean, did I have it tough? The toughest part I had was, guys would, put you in a hole and say, fight out of it, fight out of it, fight out of it. And that was just a way of testing your grit.
Right.
To want to know if you really were interested enough to come back. I mean, I've heard horror stories of training programs and everything else, but I can't say that I lack any respect for the ways that guys are trained. It's just that I didn't have to go through that and all that punishment.
Right. Memories of meeting Harley Race.
Oh, Harley Race was, probably one of my idols. I mean, you're trying to learn the business, and I learned from Harley, and then I also learned a great deal from him by watching his matches and emulating quite a bit of the things that he did.
Would you rate Harley as a great trainer?
As a great trainer, yeah, you'd have to. I mean, he was tough, but by the same token, it is a work, and plain and simple. He taught us that, but he also taught you that you needed respect for the business.
Right. So did any of the older guys, like the veterans, when you first started, you talked a little bit about it during your training, they would try to, stiff you and stretch you to see if you...
Are you talking about during training?
Yeah, during training, yeah, before you got in the ring for your first couple matches and stuff like that.
Oh, I think, the toughest time I had was probably when you would go into the dressing rooms. You weren't really smart, and you weren't really all that much with it. And consequently, guys would, shove you. Hey, you think you're tough? Hey, kid, you think you can handle this? And, that was, to some degree, a little bit intimidating because, again, you thought you knew it was a work, but you weren't 100% sure it was a work.
Right.
So you didn't know exactly. And again, there was a guy, everybody referred to him as Stretcher Etchison, who came up on the carnival circuit when wrestling was a part-time gig. By that, I mean, you worked the winter months, but there was no air conditioning in the summer. So in the summertime, all these guys went out on what they called AT shows, short for athletic shows. And you would go into these small towns and you would take on all comers. Usually there was a plant in the audience, but sometimes these guys had to take on the local, town tough.
Right.
And of course, when that happened, their only job, because it was the one side of the ring was against the tent itself. And so all the guy had to do, if the guy had the best of him, was get him over toward the other side of the tent where somebody could hit the guy with a ball bat or a brick or something in the back and distract him long enough so the guy could save the promoter in money.
Memories of meeting Lord Littlebrook for the very first time. And was he a tough guy?
Lord Littlebrook was a little guy. I mean, he was a midget.
Right.
He was the savior, basically, for midget wrestling because before Lord Littlebrook, these guys worked as independents. So they were open to getting screwed by each and every promoter. But once Littlebrook got these guys organized into son of a, I guess you'd want to call it a quasi-union, and with everybody working for Littlebrook, basically. And I will say that he was not as mean as Moolah, where Moolah was taking 30% of these girls' money. Littlebrook had a 10% booking fee. And then again, on various holidays, Christmas, New Year's, they would divvy back to the wrestlers in the form of bonus some of those expenses that hadn't been paid out, for phone calls, for, transportation, for office space and things like that.
Where were you living when you were training at? What state?
Oh, St. Joe, Missouri.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where Littlebrook is, as far as I know, is still living. I was back there this past summer, and I tried to see him, and I tried to see Little Tokyo, but I couldn't get a hold of either one. Now, I understand Littlebrook's his health is not good, and he's living with a daughter or something, but I couldn't locate him or Little Tokyo.
What were some of your memories of your first match?
The fact that I thought I was in great shape, and it was supposed to be like a 14, 15-minute match, 20-minute Broadway, or not a Broadway, but the guy was supposed to beat me. And I just remember that even though I played football and didn't have any jitters, and I played in front of thousands of people. Here I was in I think it was Waterloo, Iowa. And maybe there was 3,000 people there. And I just remember the nerves being such that I was so tense. And, the guy kept telling me, loosen up, you're going to blow up.
Right.
But I was stiff. And again, in about the 7 or 8 minute mark, I'm saying, beat me. Huh. I can't take anymore. You can't think. Right. I mean, when they call it blowed up, in other words, that's a thing we refer to where you're just you can't think of your next move. It's you're totally gassed. And I was begging him, beat me, and of course the promoter said, I thought it was going to go longer than that. I said I couldn't go any longer. I said I was completely gassed. Right. So it was a matter of just finding that relaxation point, which the longer you were in it, the more matches you had, the easier it was to relax.
What was the hardest thing for you to pick up? Was it psychology, or was it learning how to take bumps and stuff?
The bumps came easy. The psychology was the hardest part. And, we've talked about over the years about how this guy's got it and that he goes through a process and he loses it. With me, I think that it took about probably 12 to 13 months of working 6-7 days a week to pick up the psychological aspect of it. In other words, everything that you do in the ring has got to mean something. In other words, why do it? And pretty soon, as you watch other guys and you learn various things and various tactics from wrestlers. I can recall one time we were in some place in, I think, West Virginia. It was a coal mining town, and the people were very, impoverished and didn't have a lot of money. But it was for I think, the sports program at the local high school. And so the mine actually bought all the tickets to the event and then gave them out to the miners to attend. I mean, you had a good-sized gymnasium and it was packed, but because it was free, nobody gave a shit. And I remember the first match going out and doing their best, and people just sat there on their hands and didn't react. Second match goes out, which was myself, and I said, I can top that. I can take bigger bumps, more bumps, yada, yada. And again, no reaction. And one of the old timers said, watch me, kid. And he goes out and he grabs a hold, and that was a simple headlock. Headlock takeover, headlock takeover, headlock takeover, headlock takeover, headlock takeover. And eventually, he bored the people into following him. So when the guy started to come out of the hold, they were pissing down their leg. I mean, it's just that it was free to them. And there is a difference between when something is free to somebody and when somebody pays for something. It's like when I worked in Australia. The promoter over there, Larry O'Day at the time, had a per week guarantee. And he hated to see us American guys have a day off. So he would sell shows to the Sydney Soccer Club or the Sydney Rugby Club or whatever it was. I mean, these were like Las Vegas casinos, but they supported the amateur soccer or Aussie Rules football clubs. And so these were sold shows, but just, he made the minimum on them, but it was free to them. In other words, they just use it like, Las Vegas used to get the people in there. So they would buy drinks and they would play the slot machines, which was the revenue producer for them. But I remember talking to an American comedian there, and he said, these are the hardest goddamn clubs to work because they don't pay anything for it. It's free, and they're just really hard to entertain. He said, you figure out the people they want to, goddamn it, they paid $50. They're going to have a hell of a time, whether it's a good show or not. They're going to say it was a good show. So, once you learn that, then, it's one of those things that, because it's free, that doesn't mean that the people are going to react or going to have a good time.
How did you wind up in Portland for Don Owens?
I worked Australia. I made my first trip to Japan. And so somebody had told me, and I think it was a guy named Bobby Shane, and said, hey, he said, you can make a lot of money in Portland. He said, it's a nothing happening territory. He said, but it's a good place to learn and earn at the same time. He said, so he said, I would suggest that you get out there. And of course, like I said, I came back from Australia, Japan, and then I said, well, let me go out there and give her a go and see what happens. And it all worked out very well for me. I mean, I wouldn't call it homesteading, but it's still my home today. But again, how I ended up there, I have no idea.
What are your memories about Don Owens?
Oh, where do you want me to start? I mean, I can start with, Don Owens, when he was in the ring, he was so cheap that he wouldn't hire a ring announcer. And what he would do was he would do his own announcing. But, what you saw in the ring was a very blah old man. And introducing in this corner, and he was very blasé. But when he was in the dressing room, he was a very colorful gentleman. I mean, he always had stories, but the reason being that he didn't want to outshine his wrestlers. In other words, he could have very well entertained. I mean, because he was the master of ceremonies for an annual Christmas party with a television station there. Because again, he was very entertaining. Had very lots of jokes and lots of good timing, and that old colloquial type of guy. But what you saw in the presence of the camera was a very blasé guy. Just pretty ordinary.
Is it true that his brother used to bet on shoots?
Oh yeah. We. I don't know where you came up with that question, but they weren't really shoots. They were works.
Right.
What would happen was, the guys would get together without the knowledge of the promoter and say, who's going to be his brass jock champion? That's what he called it. Who wants to go for the brass jock tonight? Huh. That's the way he talked. And of course, the brass jock was really determined by the boys.
Right.
And what happened is he would pay 20 to the winner in cash, 10 to the loser. And of course, after one guy would put the other guy over, the other guy would give the other guy 5. They'd everybody walk away with even money, and
nice. Just
kept the little thing going. But it was just a little fun thing. And he might have known. I don't think he did, but because he was that man's man. Jesus Christ! Got to have a shoot tonight. Got to give the old man his jollies. What about you, Wiskowski? Are you up for it? And sometimes it got carried away. And one of the funniest fucking things I ever seen involved the Iron Sheik and a guy by the name of Ricky Hunter. There was a wrestler by the name of Jerry Oates, who had come out to the Northwest. He traditionally stayed below the Mason-Dixon line, but he'd come out to Oregon to wrestle. And at that time, there was just a tremendous amount of stars. You couldn't get over Dat Savage because he was in the office. Jimmy Snuka was there. And so you had a plethora of baby faces that were already over Lonnie Main. But anyway, Elton said to Jerry Oates one night, he said, "Hey," he said, "what about you, Oates? Do you think you think you can take on the Sheik?" And Jerry said, "Well, I'll give her a go. That Sheik's tough." But, and so they went out, and it was agreed that he would put the Sheik over in this little 1-minute shoot. And during this 1-minute shoot, Sheik, physically, Jerry gave him his body and he suplexed him, and he did. He dropped him on his head. And so again, there was a guy by that name, Johnny Eagles, who was pretty much on his last legs as far as the wrestling industry went. But Elton liked him because he was a would-be shooter, and he kissed Elton's ass. And so Eagles was only being used on the southern end of Oregon. He wasn't being used well in Portland or Seattle, which were the money towns. And so he needed to keep himself alive, keep himself in the semis anyway, right, in these smaller towns. And so he wanted the brass jock, but he knew that, Sheik was very capable. And he seen this incident where, he dropped Oates on his head. So there was a guy by the name of Ricky Hunter, a Canadian kid. I mean, a pretty strong kid. And I don't know if he's deceased now or not. I heard he wasn't in good health. But anyway, Johnny Eagles now is just pumping Ricky Hunter up. God damn it, Ricky. Oh, if you get in this fucking shoot with Sheik, you got to protect yourself. You don't want to give that guy your body. He'll hurt you. He'll kill you. So anyway, it all comes down to Salem, and so, he said, "Sheik, what about you? You ready to give Ricky Hunter a go?" And of course, Sheik said, yeah, I'll give Ricky Hunter a go. And so he said, what about you, Ricky? You ready to take on the Sheik? I'm ready. And already,
Right.
he's chomping at the bit. So, I mean, and I witnessed this. So anyway, Elton leaves the room and, of course, Lonnie Main sticks, Elton's cigar up his ass and walks around while Elton's upstairs. And then as he comes down, he puts it back there. Elton comes back, picks it up.
Huh.
God damn, quit smoking these things. They taste like shit.
Wow.
But anyway, they get ready so Sheik goes over to Ricky and he says, Ricky, he said, maybe you put Sheik over tonight in this little shoot. We split money. Ricky Hunter, no fucking way. We're going to go. So they get up there and they start the match. And again, it's supposed to be the first minute is supposed to be the actual shoot.
Right.
And, and both of them, they're testing each other. I mean, it's the real deal.
Right.
And it goes 1 minute, minute and a half, 2 minutes. And finally, Elton's up there screaming, at the top of his lungs, God damn it! Work, you bastards! You're killing my fucking town! Work! Of course, all the marks are hearing him. But anyway, finally, what did happen is they finally did engage, and Sheik double armed him to suplex him, but Ricky Hunter had grapevine the Sheik's leg, and as in order to suplex him, all that happened was Sheik put a mat burn from the middle of his forehead to the top of his head. I mean, he beat Ricky, but with the same token, I mean, oh my God,
wow.
what a many stories about Elton Owens, and you could go on and on and on about Elton.
Were the paydays good up there?
Oh, very good, very good. A lot of people talked about Don Owens and what a great payoff man he was. Yes, he was good. But like he said himself, he said, Jesus Christ, he said, the nearest territory here is L.A., and he said, they don't pay shit. And he said, then you got to go clear to Kansas City. And he said, to get guys out here, he said, I got to pay probably better than a lot of people do. He said, and again, but that was his little thing. He said, I just got a little chicken shit territory, is what he always referred to it as. But the fact was, it may have been a chicken shit territory, but Don Owens became a very, very wealthy man, running the Portlands, the Seattles. They may have been small towns, but again, this was pre-open gambling like they have now. This was not pre-Trailblazers, because when I first went out there, the Trailblazers were an NBA team, and they won the championship, I think, the first year that I was out there. But, there just wasn't that much entertainment for those folks, and so they could identify with wrestling.
What are your memories of meeting Playboy Buddy Rose?
Oh, I met Playboy way back when Playboy had done jobs for me in Kansas City. He was coming out of one of Vern's camps, and they sent a crew down from Minneapolis just to do jobs on TV. But I could recognize that, the guy, even though he was there doing jobs, he had talent and had ability. It just, it hadn't shown up yet. And so that was the first time I met him. And
you teamed with him too, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, we, when I went, he was already established in Oregon, and he had been in there, and him and Jesse Ventura were partners. He carried Jesse Ventura for a number of years. They're in Portland, and then Jesse was moving on to New York, and so they needed a partner for Rose, and I came in and became Rose's partner.
What are your memories of Jesse?
It's a good thing he could talk. I mean, he couldn't work in the ring. And I don't know if he still can to this day or not, but he's been lucky. I mean, in all aspects, and I'm not knocking anybody. It's just that if Jesse was left to his own working ability, he probably wouldn't have been governor, and he probably wouldn't have been financially secure like he is today. Don't forget, when he was in Oregon, he had, Buddy Rose to carry him. When he went to New York, he had Adrian Adonis to carry him. So, I don't know. I never seen any singles matches that I can ever remember Jesse shining in by any stretch of the imagination. He's a nice guy, but there's a lot of nice guys that can't fucking work, and it's either can't work by design or can't work on purpose. In other words, they never grasp the concept, or that if I play stupid, nobody will expect anything out of me. So,
right. You seem to stay in Portland for a while. Did you like the territory?
I based myself out of there. I didn't plan it that way. I mean, I was planning to go out to Oregon for a short stint, and I really liked the South, and I wanted to head back down south. You go out there, you get married, and all of a sudden your wife don't want to leave, and now that becomes a problem. And then, so I basically started basing myself out of there. I mean, yes, I went to San Francisco. Yes, I went to Japan. Yes, I went to Europe. I went to the Middle East. I went to Kuala Lumpur. But I was basically based out of there. So it was some place that was home, and some place where I could always come back to. And if I needed to work, then I always had a job there. I didn't always go back there during my off periods, but for the most part, I think that, after, between Europes or, because Europe was I was there a total of 45 months over 5 years, and you had the periods where, it got too cold.
Right.
So, Wrestling Intense didn't get it in December and January and February.
How did you develop your promo skills?
I don't know that I ever did. I think that there were people like Lord Lilbrook, and I remember Lord Alfred Hayes. When I got my first break of any substance in Kansas City. I mean, I had breaks prior to Kansas City, but they were sporadic things. I mean, when I was in Tennessee and was teamed with Big Bad John, I was teamed with Big Bad John because a guy named Gray had been injured, and they just kicked me up into his spot, and I was there for about 4 to 5 weeks, and then when he came back, I went to the bottom again. And basically Big Bad John did all the talking, but I had a style picked out, and Lord Alfred Hayes, when I did an interview in Kansas City, he said, "You got the right idea, kid." He said, "Not everybody's a screamer." And he said, if you just get your message across, he said, that's more important than sitting there and calling everybody stupid asses. And he said, basically talk around the asshole and it'll fall out. You don't have to chew it out.
All right. What were your early memories of Jimmy Snuka?
Jimmy Snuka, the first time I met Jimmy was in Oregon, and Jimmy was just a marvelous worker. I mean, Jimmy, he had complete control of his body. I mean, Jimmy could not go to the gym for 6 months and then start back and go to the gym for 2 and would look in marvelous shape again. But he had tremendous athletic ability, could do anything, and, was easy to work with in the ring. And to this day, is probably one of the greatest workers in this business. I mean, that's up for conjecture anyway. Who's a great worker? Who's a good worker? Who's this? But I mean, to my way of thinking, he's a great worker.
What was the party scene like back in Portland? Was there a party scene?
Oh, there's a party scene in every town. I mean, It doesn't stop with Portland, Oregon. A party was, could be had in any place. I mean, there were hot spots like there in Portland, for parties like there was in Miami, like there was in Tampa, like there was any place else. It's been known that Portland had a share, but again, Portland lent itself because of the proximity and everything. I mean,
right.
It wasn't like working for Vince Sr. when you could stick around after the matches and have a party and then go home. You had another town to get to. Whereas in Portland, you were home the same night. You could take that couple of hours out, or you could take the couple of hours out when you got back and party and have a good time.
Early memories of Dutch Savage.
What do you want me to say about Dutch? Dutch was a great worker, but a miserable fucking individual. I never had any clashes with Dutch, but I know we talk about, incidences with Lonnie Main, incidences with Snuka, incidences with Buddy Rose. In the ring, Dutch Savage was a great worker. As a personality and as a human being, he left a lot to be desired. And he always liked to think that he was a step above the wrestlers in the territory. And I think that caused him a lot of conflict. And also the fact that I think that on more than one occasion, they caught him dipping into the money.
Wow.
And of course, again, the only incident I can remember was one time that, the woman that sold the tickets and collected the tickets up in a Washington town that Dutch was overseeing for Savage came, and she came in and she was crying and she said, I know that you guys get paid off a percentage of the house, but she said, Dutch told me to take $1,500 and put it aside and not report it to the state and in an envelope and give it to him.
Huh, wow.
And so immediately a guy by the name of Jonathan Boyd heard this.
Right.
Of course, he picks up the phone and calls down Owens. And again, maybe it was a three-way split because, $1,500 could be easily divided by three.
Yeah.
There was three partners. There was Elton, there was Dutch, and there was Don. So it could have been $500 a head of dark money that wasn't reported either to the state of Washington, which at that time had and still does has a commission that you had to pay off the top. But anyway, Dutch got the blame for it, and it was eventually because of the incident. I think Dutch was forced out by Don. It took him a while to do it, but which also lends to me. I mean, if I catch somebody stealing from me, you're not going to be there tomorrow.
Yeah. Much
less 2 months from now. So, it could have been that, they were stealing for everybody or just stealing from the boys, period. I really don't know the answer, but Dutch did take the fall in the end for it.
Memories of Jonathan Boyd.
Jonathan Boyd, a strange character. I don't think that Jonathan ever got over the fact that when he was from Australia, working Australia, and was a native Australian, that can't remember the guy's name now. The promoter was
Barnett.
Jim Barnett was the promoter, and of course he had the Americans and used the Aussies as jobbers. The only people that he used was an occasional Australian that he would run up the flagpole just to keep some interest in local Australians. When Jonathan Boyd came to this country, he was really pretty bitter against the Americans. So Jonathan was strange. I remember one time that we were in a little podunk town, and there was nobody there, and Jonathan had to lose the deciding fall. It was me and Rose against Jonathan and somebody else. And he was so bitter that he just kept selling and trying to make that tag, and the people just finally, they were worn out, they were exasperated, and they didn't give a shit.
Huh.
And finally when he got beat, and Jonathan's point was, yeah, well, you beat somebody. No, you fucking bored the people to goddamn death, and you really fucked up the match. Thank you, but that's just the way Jonathan was. I mean, he'd get a bug up his ass about something. Another good story about Jonathan was that when they needed to kayfabe him because he had a girlfriend. Right. And, of course, he would tell this young girl all the finishes and shit that was going to happen. So there was a loser leave town sequence of matches that was coming up. And so we actually had to kayfabe Boyd and kayfabe everybody else in the card because, all you had to do was let Jonathan know. He'd go tell his girlfriend. Of course, everybody in the the girl shitter would know the finishes for the next 3 weeks. or 4 weeks. And so we kayfabed him. And like I said, when the night came and it was between Piper and Rose, they had let the word out that it was, of course, Rose that was leaving town.
Right.
When in fact it was Piper. And, when the finish came, the jaw that dropped the most was Jonathan Boyd's because he was the one that was being kayfabed on the whole.
That's great.
But, well, you had to do it. I mean, you had to protect the business because otherwise, if everybody knows your finish, what the hell's the point of people coming? Shit, what do I need to go for? God damn, I know Rose is going to win.
Memories of Piper.
Piper, Piper, I liked Piper when he was, before he became a superstar. And I still, like Roddy. I just think that at one point, Roddy became maybe the real Roddy Piper. I don't know. I just remember one time in Portland when he was going to make an appearance and he did not come into the dressing room. He stayed out in his limousines, doing whatever he was doing until it was time for him to make his appearance. And that bothered me. The fact that he couldn't come in and say hello to guys like Buddy Rose or
was this after
like myself. Excuse me?
Was this after New York?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was in between these New Yorks and in between movies and whatever else. I mean, I just took it like, are you too good to come in here and say, hey, guys, thanks for putting me where I am. I couldn't have been where I was without you guys putting me over, but thank you No. It was like, I'm too fucking good now to associate with you guys. I need to stay out in my limousine and just come in and do my little shtick, get my $3,000 or $2,000 or whatever it was he got for making the appearance.
I guess that was when he was doing the stuff with Styles.
Are you talking about
the Grappler? And
no, this was when Don Owens promotion had basically folded, and there was a new promotion coming up called Portland Wrestling. In other words,
Billy Jack?
He was there. No.
Okay.
He was there to pass the torch from supposedly Don Owens, who had just retired,
right,
to the new Portland Wrestling,
gotcha,
which was a guy that had really good intent. He owned there was a rollerblading hockey league.
I do remember this. Okay.
And he owned that franchise, and they drew pretty well, but he wanted to buy a building because the present Coliseum was not the Portland Coliseum, but the old Coliseum was too big. I mean, he'd drive 3,500, 5,000 fans, and in a 15,000 seat arena, it looked empty. So he was looking for a smaller venue, but he wanted to, if he bought the building, he wanted more than just roller hockey to go in there. He wanted wrestling, So he started the new Portland Wrestling, and that's, God, I think his name was Richard Small, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, it never came to about. The other clubs in the roller hockey, they weren't drawing shit, and so it folded, I think, after 1 year.
Memories of Ron Bass.
Oh, Ron Bass was, always a lot of fun. Ron was easy to get along with, country boy, and I remember one time in Seattle, in particular, when we were up there, and we'd spent the night in Seattle, and so we went to the gym the next morning. It was down in a Pike Street gym was the name of the place, and it was right off the big tourist open air market there for fish and all that shit. But anyway, it was obviously a gay club,
right?
A gay club, and so we go in, we pay our money, we have our workout, and of course, he's looking over his shoulder at this guy and that guy and all the fucking gays. And again, I got nothing against him, but anyway, so after our workout, we go in and we're going to have a sauna. And, Big Ron, I mean, he's a big kid, and he had a little bitty towel that they gave you, like for sweat. And he was placing this thing on the bench there, and he was, very carefully. And I said, what are you doing? He said, you don't know who's been in here and what they've been doing. And it just, it brought me to my knees, and I never thought about it. I mean, but he was right. I mean, God knows who has been in there and what they've been doing. But and there was another incident which I won't get in. Well, I can because he wasn't married at the time. Anyway, we were seeing these ladies, and anyway, this woman was seeing another guy, and so as Sam is just coming out of the bedroom, her boyfriend comes home. Of course, he suspects what he suspects, and he, looked at Sam and he said, "She's my girl, Sam." And the last time I saw him, which was in Tampa for that wrestling reunion down there, the first thing I said was, "She's my girl, Sam." And of course, he thought a second, and then he bust out laughing because he remembered the incident.
Right.
Nothing came of it. I mean, we walked out.
Jay Youngblood was there too at the time, right?
Yeah, Jay Youngblood, another very accomplished worker that I don't know what he died of, or some mysterious complications. I think he was in Australia at the time, but another really fantastic worker. I mean, didn't in the present day era, because he was athletic, but he didn't look the part. He didn't have an athletic body, and but he was a marvelous worker.
You then went to San Francisco territory for a little bit, and you worked with Roy Shires for Roy. What are your memories of Roy?
Oh, listen to me, goddammit. You fuckers, you can't understand this fucking business. It's just three things. Goddammit, a few wrestling holds, couple of high spots, chopping meat, a fucking few bumps. Goddamn, what's hard about that? Me and fucking Ray Stevens were the greatest. And Shires had that goddamn way about him, that he pushed guys. And him and Rose tangled assholes on a number of occasions, but he never pushed me on interviews. I mean, I can remember him browbeating guys over and over and over again. Redo that goddamn thing. Jesus fucking Christ. We're going to have to be here a while. I'm going to take it out of your fucking check. But he intimidated guys, and even to the point where I'd heard that somebody, he browbeat the guy so bad that he committed suicide, that he figured, fuck, I'll never be able to work, and goddamn it, I can't please Roy, and this and that. So again, he never bothered me. I ran into him a few years after that. I think when I was working for Independence, and I was in Vegas, and I was leaving Vegas, and goddamn, I see this fucking guy, and he's all cowboy hat, kind of look like I want to say Foghorn Lego, no, that's such a fucking chicken, but Yosemite Sam, I think.
Right.
He's all fucking hat, and I see this, and they call me up to the podium because I'm flying standby, and I'm getting my ticket all squared away, and I see this fucking hat walking toward me. He said, "I thought that was you, but I didn't want to say anything." God damn. I said, "Jesus Christ, Roy, what are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I'm down here buying another fucking whorehouse." He said, "I was in the wrong business all those years." He said, "Fuck," he said, "I bought one whorehouse." He said, "I'm making nothing but money." He said, "Now I'm bought another one." He said, "Fuck that wrestling business." And we had a little conversation, and he I don't know, it was a couple years after that, I think he died, passed away. He was quite a personality. I mean, Roy could be very abrasive and aggressive to anybody. I can remember at the television station, of course, he always was, sometimes he wouldn't really look for a waste paper basket. He didn't chew tobacco or anything. He just fucking spit on the floor. And so he's in there, and of course, the president of the station comes in, and Roy's having a piss, and he steps up to the urinal. "Roy, goddamn it, I understand you got a ranch." He said, "You got a farm." "Oh, it's a goddamn ranch." And he says, "Well, I got a ranch too." He said, I raise Brangus. "Brangus? They're the fucking shits. You need to get a real fucking cattle on your goddamn place,"
Right.
And he just, that was Roy. He instead of being somewhat diplomatic. He just wasn't going to be diplomatic at all. But again, I never had any troubles with him, and we didn't always see eye to eye, but he always paid me, and I didn't have anything evil to say about the guy. He, like I said, he was a personality.
Ray Stevens?
Oh, Ray Stevens. What can you? What good can't you say? I mean, a nice guy could work. I mean, I recall the very first time that I met Ray Stevens was in St. Louis, Missouri. I'd heard Ray Stevens this, Ray Stevens that, and he basically, stayed out around, the Cow Palace for years and years and years. But they brought him into St. Louis, but he didn't mean anything to the St. Louis crowd. Big deal. Opening match. Who in the hell are you?
Huh.
But by the time his little 15-minute match was over with, the people, they were very, very, upset and wanted to kill him. I mean, he was just that kind of worker that could walk in there cold and had the ability to have a match that people could understand. I mean, and get behind.
You went over to Europe for a couple times. Was it hard adjusting to the style in Europe?
No, not really. I had a good time in Europe. I mean, I stayed there off and on for 5 years. I mean, like I said, I spent a total of 45 months there. And the only difference that you had to adjust to was the round system.
Right.
And to me, I think I brought something to those people. I mean, when I first got there, you'd be beating the shit out of the guy, kicking the shit out of him, supposedly. And the bell would ring, and he'd get up and go to the corner. And I said, hey, I tell you what. I said, why don't you just lay there till half the thing is over, and then get up and drag your ass to the corner? That way what I've done to you means something. Otherwise, if I do something dastardly to you, and the fucking bell rings, time for a Pauser, that's what they call it, Pauser rest. What the fuck does it mean? I just wasted all my fucking efforts and your efforts up to that point, selling, and then you get up dance to the corner, get yourself a drink,
Right.
and come back out. But once they understood that, then it became easy. Just not much different than working a continuous match. The interesting thing about Europe was, and the biggest change for me was, the personnel that I was dealing with. Now, a lot of the German wrestlers were what they call Zuhalters, which was German for pimps. In other words, they were married to their top wage earner, which was their wife, but their wife was a prostitute. Prostitution's illegal, pimping's illegal. So, I mean, again, this is something that it was hard for me to understand. But the one guy, when I was there, I mean, it was my first tour. He'd been there, and he calls me over. He was one of the top guys. His name was Axel Dieter, and he said, you've heard I'm a Zuhalter. And I said, well, it's been mentioned, that you're involved in prostitution. And he said, well, you know what? He said, this is Europe. He said, in America, he said, you send your wife to work, and she may work with her hands. He said, in Europe, he said, I send my wife to work. She's just working with another body part. And I found myself fucking saying, well, fuck, he's right, I guess. I mean, it makes sense to me.
Huh.
But again, not every wrestler in Europe, was a pimp. But a lot of them. And they had the pimp union. I mean, they had a stronghold on some of the various promotions. Hanover was that way. Bremen to a certain extent. So a number of those promotions were controlled by the pimp network. That doesn't mean that those guys weren't good workers. Some of them, again, the one I mentioned, Axel Dieter was an excellent worker. He knew how to sell. He knew when to sell. He knew when to come back. And, you know, the only thing Axel didn't like was he liked to be stiff, but he didn't like to be stiffed back. So again, once you talk to him and say, hey, I can hit you in the fucking kidneys as hard as you can hit me in the kidneys, then he says, well, maybe we can work now. We can work together and earn money. I could go off on a tangent, and I spent, once I was over, you know, then the old guard, which was the Pimp Network, because they had been there for many, many years, and they were starting to, their drawing power had fallen. And, you know, the word was out that they were pimps and subalterns. And so they had lost a little bit of their clout. Now you had Otto Vance, the big fat guy from Graz, Austria, who was now, he was over in Graz, and which was his own hometown. He had his own tournament that he ran. And then he was over in Bremen. He was basically the booker in Bremen and the big superstar. So he was wanting to expand. They needed, you know, some new talent in Hanover and Vienna and Linz, Austria. And so enter Otto. Now, I'm over, and I spent one whole season in those towns getting him over. In other words, making him look good. So it comes the second year, and now we're still, you know, all in the same boat. Now, Otto, you're over. It's time we work together. Instead of you wanting 90% of the fucking match, you know, and we go Broadway. It don't work that way anymore. We got to be even up. And so on this one particular occasion, I was working with him, and I knew his old game. He would back into the corner, and he would, you know, cover himself up, and he'd say, heel, heel. In other words, that means open up on him. You'd beat the shit out of him, you know, and then he'd come roaring out, bam, bam, manchette, manchette. So he would get into the corner, and he'd say, heel, heel, and I'd hit him once, and then I'd just walk away from him. Same thing, get back into the heel, heel, I'd hit him once, walk away from him. He wanted to make a comeback, but he couldn't make a comeback because there was nothing to make a comeback for Christ's fucking sake. And so finally, I'm beating the shit out of him, and then I start bailing out of the ring. When he starts to come out of the ring, I just bail out. So finally, in the 5th round, it's time for his comeback. I'm in there. Make your comeback, Otto. He was so fucking mad and so pissed off that he wouldn't make a comeback. He was just so fucked up that he wouldn't make a comeback. Of course, that was the beginning to the end for me because he was in charge and I wasn't.
Right.
And I remember coming to the back of the garderobe, the dressing room, and Peter, who was the booker, another pimp, Peter Imbro, that means Peter in the office. And so I'm sure that, you know, my fate was, it was shortened after that. And then the next year I was, you know, doing jobs for the opening guys. But you know what? They thought that would be the meaning, but I'm fucking smarter than that. You know, I know, you know, the American style, which is, it all pays the same.
Yeah.
On the top, on the bottom, day off, week off. You know, but the European mentality was, oh goddamn, I haven't worked in 3 fucking days. You know, because they got an abundance of talent. Yeah. And they only got 5 matches on the card, and you got 30 guys in the parada. So somebody's going to be off. If they're using you, you're going to be working every night because, you know, you're definitely going to be working on the off nights. And by the off nights, I mean Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are, you know, pretty much sellouts anyway.
Right.
So they always kind of like reserve. They put, you know, a little bit of a strong card on the weekends. But, you know, on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, that's when, you know, the stars are all out. I mean, they're going to be in full force. But a lot of those guys, they used to worry, I haven't worked in 3 days. Fuck.
You also worked for...
I'm getting work. I mean, I'm here. I'm getting paid. I don't give a shit about work or not.
You also worked for Leroy McGurk?
I did work for Leroy McGurk, yeah. One of my few incidences where I had I had conflict. Leroy McGurk's was blind, obviously. His wife and daughter, who briefly worked for, I think, WWE way back when as an announcer, and Doug Summers. And she used to be married to Brian Blair as well, I think, before Doug Summers married her or stole her away from him. But when I went to work for Leroy, it was one of those interim things where I wasn't in Europe, and I was just looking for 3 months worth of bookings. And so I went down to work for McGurk. And we had a good crew down there. I mean, there was myself, Skandor Akbar.
You were managed by him, I believe, right?
Yeah. There was Ricky Morton, Eddie Gilbert. God, who else was there? But a very good crew of good talent.
What are your memories of Eddie?
Oh, I liked Eddie. I mean, I won't go into, somebody that's dead. I mean,
right. He
was the first time that I'd ever ran across somebody that, even back then, didn't kayfabe. I mean, I was, when he had this, he had a gay guy that did his TNT, it was called. It was a little scoop sheet. It was probably the first Meltzer type publication. It was the guy lived up, I think, in New York someplace. His daddy was an IBM executive. And Terry Sum was his name. But anyway, and I said to Eddie, I said, Jesus Christ, that guy's gay. Don't that bother you? Don't bother me none. As long as he don't try anything with me. I said, oh, okay. But I said, but he's talking business with the guy, It's the first time I'd ever seen that. I said, Jesus Christ, kayfabe.
Right.
And again, he said, well, Jerry Lawler does it all the time, which was unbeknownst to me. I mean, Lawler had these little cartoons in Abner magazines and shit like that, of the Masked Man and all that cartoon shit. And again, that was an aspect of the business that I just didn't know existed. But I mean, Eddie was a good worker, and I got along with Eddie. But Eddie, that was one of the things I was just kind of shocked. Jesus Christ, it was you've broken the religious code.
Yeah.
But anyway, talking about McGurk and that whole scenario there, we had some of those regular towns were just really on fire, and we were making a lot. We were drawing a lot, but we weren't making a lot of money. A guy named Jerry Brown was there, Ron McFarland, and the payoffs were not reflecting that. So anyway, after the final straw, was happened in Oak City, and so we said, we're not being paid fairly. You need to make this up or something. And then Doug Summers and his girlfriend, wife or whatever she was at the time, we'd been to Springfield, Missouri, to do a hell of a house. I think it was $7,000 house. And somehow the money got lost between Springfield and going back to Tulsa. So everybody got the minimum payout. What the fuck is this shit?
Yeah.
And so just everybody started to get edgy. And so it all came down to Oak City, and we want to be paid. If we're not paid, we're out of here. And so the guys basically walked out.
Huh.
And it became a big confrontation, big write-up in all the Tulsa Times or whatever, I think it was Tulsa Times, fired wrestlers won't be back for Leroy McGurk.
You wound up working for Vince McMahon Sr. around that time period, right?
Could have been. Yeah, I don't know if I can't remember now if I was in between Europes or whatever.
What were your thoughts on Vince?
Senior?
Yeah.
Nice man. I could never tell you what happened, or, they brought me in for...
I think Blassie was your manager?
Well, yeah. And I think somewhere it changed in there. Like he did a couple of matches, and then on the second set of tapes, then he said, I got too many guys. I don't remember. Maybe it was, I can't remember now who was first, but I had the Wizard and then Blassie, or I had Blassie, then the Wizard. And one of them said, I got too many guys now. He said, it's going to dilute me too much to manage you. And I didn't give a shit. Just make me some money. But that never happened either. So obviously, at that point, somebody didn't like me, or I pissed somebody off, because was supposed to be back for the next tapings, and it just never came about.
Did you like working with managers, or would you rather be your own?
I'd rather be my own. I mean, I figure a manager serves one purpose. He takes your heat or shares your heat. And I have no problem with managers. I mean, guys that can't talk, they got to have a manager. Or guys that have trouble getting heat in the ring, they need a manager. It's just like a crutch. They got to have that aspect of it. Simply because they lack something, whether it's the ability to speak or whether it's the ability to get heat in the ring. They need that third aspect in there. The manager situation is it's out of hand and has been out of hand for a number of years. I mean, guys that could work can work.
Yeah.
And if you have a manager that would add to your deal, that little extra thing in there. But for the most part, I just seen it as a crutch and something that you really don't need.
When you were working for Vince Sr., I think you had a couple matches, maybe one or two with Bob Backlund, and you also got to work with Bruno. What are your memories of working with Bob and Bruno?
I didn't really work with either one of them. I mean, later on, I worked with Bruno's kid. I never worked with
David.
Backlund.
Actually, what were your memories of Bob and Bruno?
Have nothing against either one of them. I mean, if you want history, I can give you history. I mean, of what I was told, and it's not something that I was privy to. I mean, Backlund was a very black and white type of guy.
Yeah.
Not exactly, your most charismatic guy in the world. But then again, there's a lot of us that aren't exactly charismatic, and the statement was made, by Bruno supposedly. Jesus Christ, he's not ethnic. He's too black and white. He'll never draw a dime. And the story that I got was that Vince heard this, and he said he will draw. And yes, Backlund appeared to draw because he surrounded Backlund with some of the greatest workers in the world. I mean, he surrounded him with Morocco, with Orton Jr., with Playboy Buddy Rose, with Ray Stevens, with the list goes on and on and on.
Right.
So when you're surrounded with that kind of talent, Jesus Christ, you better be able to put an ass in the seat.
Yeah.
And again, I to this day, I'm not saying it wasn't Backlund. It could have been Backlund. But I'm going to say, if you got that supporting cast, goddamn, I think, even I could have been a success. I mean, you could have made me the world champion. And if you give me that kind of supporting under talent, it's going to draw. It kind of reminds me of the old era when, and I call it the old era. I mean, I guess you'd call it the ancient era, where I can't think of his name right now. Was the former world Buddy Rogers? When somebody would want Buddy Rogers, to come into their territory, Buddy, I want you to come work for me. Oh, okay. I'll come, but I want this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy to come in with me. In other words, he wanted to surround himself with everybody that had a goal of making money. In other words, my place on the card is opening match. I'll give you a hell of an opening match, but I know that I'm going to be making more money in an opener working under Buddy Rogers than I am going to be the main event, working with somebody else. So it just, that's the kind of position it reminds me of. I mean, Rogers had the ability to take in and had his own crew that would come with him. And again, they all knew their job, and their job was to, of course, make Buddy Rogers and make the card a whole.
As far as Vince Jr. goes, did you ever have any interactions with Vince Jr. at all?
No, never did. I mean, shook his hand. That was about it. Never had anything to do with him. Just heard things. Again, second and third hand. I got nothing for him. That's nothing against him. I mean, you got to admit, he's got to be one of the smartest guys in the world for the way that he marketed wrestling. I mean, it was basically an unknown product that he took, that was nickel and dimed. I mean, we sell pictures, at $1 a pop, and he takes it to another level with vitamins and lunch boxes and all the paraphernalia, the action figures. Just a very, very smart man about marketing and taking somebody who's got a little bit of charisma and creating somebody larger than life, which he was able to do. I mean, he was able to produce, I'm going to say, make chicken salad out of chicken shit. In other words, he could take a wrestler with no working ability, but with a spot of charisma and, make them a lot of money and make himself a tremendous amount of money.
You went back to Portland in the 80s, and did the territory change a lot?
Did the territory change a lot? Well, I don't know. I can't, the dates in 80, I'm trying to think. No, not that much. It was still basically a Don Owens territory at that time. I mean, they were still drawing money.
Right.
The downfall, for Don Owens really didn't come until the WWF, created their product.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, these guys are superstars and we're just getting the local shit.
Right.
Even though guys that had been in Portland, like Piper, like Rose, and others, had been to the WWF. It was still, well, you're kind of like the minor league now. Whereas before, that was the only ball game in town. That was all they knew. They were the biggest stars that walked the face of the earth. That would, probably be about the only change that I could, point to. I mean, nothing really changed. I mean, no matter what Don Owens would have done, his 2-camera shoot wouldn't have been able to, compete with, Vince's 35 cameras and
right.
overnight editing to, edit 35 cameras down to an hour show. So, I mean, how would you compete with that?
What are your memories of the Mega? I don't want to kibosh the name. What was it? Mega
Maharishi.
Yeah.
That was just a gimmick that, again, in between Europes, I went back there, and there was a spiritual leader named Bhagwan Shi Rajneesh, and he had come into Oregon, and basically he bought a big ranch in Central Oregon. And what he did was he brought in these followers from all over the world, from all over Europe, all over India, all over the United States, and he registered them as voters. In this small town. Well, they actually had more people in that town than the town had. So they renamed the town from Antelope to Rajneeshpuram. They voted to rename the town. And of course, everybody became suspect that this is rural Oregon now. And so then they were coming up and had another election. And the county itself was still larger than their commune out there. So what happened was, it was the first case of bioterrorism in this country. They actually went into the largest town, the Dalles, and poisoned the salad bars the day before the election. So, so people couldn't get out and vote. It was after that, it was pretty much of a downhill battle. But anyway, this Mega Maharishi was patterned after the Bhagwan Shi Rajneesh. And I grew a long beard and dyed my bleached blonde hair, and I wore a red stocking cap and had a big red robe, and I walked around with beads and with my hands like that. And I would always be asking for donations, from my followers.
Right.
And some people would, actually send me money, physical cash. Some people would throw money at me. Some people would hand me money in the arenas. It was a funny gig. If people, I think, if you want to see just one interview that I know about, it was, as far as I know, it's still on YouTube. Probably if you punch in Mega Maharishi or Ed Wiskowski Mega Maharishi, it still comes up, an interview done out of Salem where I address my followers. And, good interaction. It's a funny little interview.
All right. You also managed Kendo Nagasaki.
Yeah. that was, when I was Mega Maharishi.
Right. How crazy did the fans get? Did they ever have riots up in Portland?
You're never going to have there were riots, but I mean, an occasional chair when people would get upset would, be thrown by the fan
right.
or something like that, or they'd pelt you with stuff. But nothing as rapid as
Mid-South.
rabid as the South. I mean,
yeah.
The South people believed, and a lot of times you would fight your way out of arenas. I mean, I could tell you story after story after story of very unpleasant situations in the South. I mean, one time we were it was in, I think, Richmond, Virginia, and Orton Sr. and Boris Malenko, they had just been beat 2 straight by the Scott brothers, and people took that as a weakness. Where Orton and Malenko were kicking the crap out of everybody, and now here the Scott brothers beat them 2 straight. They took that as a sign of weakness, and when they started back to the dressing room, the riot started, and the people were basically, we're going to kill them. The only thing I think that saved him was the fact that a guy came out of the dressing room, firing at the ceiling. And the people backed off, and they were able to get him back to the dressing room. But I mean, that's only one of many many cases down south. Another good story was about, used to be a guy, the old Pensacola territory, which was run by the Fields brothers. Their dad was a referee, and so there was a tag team match, and the finish was supposed to be that the referee gets knocked through the ropes onto the floor, and somebody comes in and kicks the shit out of the baby faces, and then he wakes up in time to get in and make the count. Huh. And so Speedy takes his bump outside, and he's laying there, and some fan is so pissed off at Speedy for getting knocked down that he goes over and he kicks Speedy. Speedy gets up, kicks the shit out of the guy, looks in and sees that it's not time, and he lays back down. And waits until it's time to go in for the fucking finish. But, hey, just crazy shit like that. I mean, another time was in some town in Mississippi, and there was a guy named, he was from Cuba. But anyway, his gimmick was he wore this little scarf around his neck. Well, he would take the scarf off and stick it down his tights.
Right.
Then when the opportune time came, in your 2 out of 3 fall match, he'd lose the first fall, second fall. He'd choke the guy out. He'd get his little thing out, wrap it around his neck, and just choke him till he was out, win the fall. Well, he wins the fall by choking this guy out. But the shakiest old gun in Mississippi, some old, guy that had been deputized, had a badge on and gets into the ring, and he got that gun right in the guy's face.
Wow.
He's shaking back and forth. Get that out of your tights. Get that out of your tights. Of course, the guy's scared to death. He's going to fucking shoot him. Yeah. So he, of course, produces the rag out of his pocket, and of course the referee's got no choice. But he lost 2 straight, pissed the promotion off because now they lose the concession.
Wow. Now Rip Oliver was there around this period of time, and Bobby Jaggers and Billy Jack. What are your memories of some of those guys?
Bobby Jaggers was always an adequate worker. I think Bobby's trouble was that I think he let his ass overload his mouth, or his mouth overload his ass. I mean, again, Bobby was, a heck of a worker. But Bobby was a bullshitter. And, a lot of guys didn't care for that. I mean, it didn't bother me. And if you go on a trip with him, he kept you entertained.
Right.
If you were on a 3-hour trip, Bobby could, tell a lie for every mile, or tell a story for every mile. And again, if you just took it at face value and it's entertainment for entertainment purposes, great. There's a story or two that Lonnie Main used to tell about when Bobby Jaggers was a mark, and he'd come around the sports arena there and want to know, how do I become a wrestler? Because, and again, Bobby talked this great athletic thing, but again, it got tied in with these bullshit. So you doubted what he was saying. And, he said, I can do this, I can do that. And I was a hell of a high school baseball player, football player. And then So I'm thinking, yeah, you were this, you were that. But come to find out, he was. I mean, he was all those things, but it got tied in with his bullshit. So you didn't know what to believe. And I remember one time we were going to go skiing. There was some Mark had a boat. It was me and him and Buddy Rose. And so we were going to go out skiing. And so, I got up, ski. Bobby said, yeah, I'm going to ski barefoot. Yeah, okay, I'll fucking believe that when I see it. God damn it, he did. He got right up, son of a bitch, kicked off one ski, kicked off the other ski, and he was skiing barefoot.
Wow.
I mean, who'd have thunk? But, he just, that was Bobby.
We did an interview maybe about 3 years ago with Billy Jack Haynes, and he was out of his mind. I don't know what he was like back in the 80s, but obviously whatever he did throughout the 80s and 90s fried his brain.
Yeah, I didn't see the interview, so I don't know. I've heard secondhand stories about it. And I know Billy's very bitter.
Yeah.
He feels like that Vince fucked him and that everybody fucked him.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is Billy was his own worst enemy. Number one, you don't quit Vince once, but he had the opportunity to quit him twice. And then he wants a third chance. Right. I just don't think that's going to happen. Maybe, but it didn't. So now he becomes bitter. Okay. Billy liked to gamble on the dogs. And whenever them dogs were opening up in Oregon in the spring, Billy had to be there for the opening of the season. One time in particular, when he was going to open up his own promotion, I mean, people were sick of Don Owens. And so Billy had all this free advertising that he's going to open up a promotion. I mean, he got, spots on all the 6 o'clock news with interviews and Billy Jack's promotion. Turn that fucking thing off.
All right.
Do you remember?
Yep, we were talking about Billy Jack and gambling on the dogs. And
he'd always have to come back, to Oregon during that. So he quits. But now he's going to open up a promotion. And like I said, he's got some momentum. And I think he even got Hulk Hogan to fly out as who charged him nothing. I think all he had to do was pay for his airline ticket and to give his gym this.
Right. I remember Billy told us about this.
This big push. And, there were thousands and thousands of people there. And then he kicked off his promotion. But again, Billy, sometimes a little bit of knowledge is more dangerous than a lot of knowledge. In other words, if you got little knowledge, you may think you know everything about the wrestling business. And Billy lined up the card with nothing but humongous guys. He didn't have no fat guys on the card. My God, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And so all he had was, big, humongous guys on the card. And so, I mean, how many times can, grab a headlock and 2 big guys come off and nobody goes down? You look at each other and probably look good on paper. I mean, got all these big guys, it's a WWF show or whatever. But his mistake was when he had his first show, Don Owens had basically, 1,500 people and Billy had probably 2,500 people at his show. But Billy hadn't done any dry runs. And consequently, there was like a match and they started like an hour late. And then they were 20 minutes between matches. And, it was just a real fiasco to produce his television.
Right.
And just the next week, everything was reversed. All the people were back at Don Owens' show. Billy had 1,000 people. Don Owens had 3,000.
Huh.
And it just went downhill from there. And, eventually he was broke and a lot of guys didn't get paid. I understand. But again, he was opening up. Another thing, that was against him was he was opening up in the worst time of the year. Now, Oregon, you can after school starts, 2 weeks after school starts, you can actually run Portland, Oregon 6 times a month until the weather breaks. You can run 4 Saturdays and 2 Tuesday specials. 2 Tuesday specials are automatic sellouts because they're not on television. But when the weather breaks, people are sick of being inside. The weather's nice. They want to be outside. They would come in to see the resurrection, for Christ's sake, much less come in for wrestling. And that's when Billy Jack chose to open up. Was during this time when the weather broke. And that was another big mistake that he made. Where Billy went wrong with, drug use or anything else, I have no idea. Last I heard that he was down and out and on public assistance, and that I have no no knowledge of.
Can we get a glass of water? Or?
Yeah,
all right.
I'm gonna get a glass, but this is.
You got it? I don't think there's glasses in there. I think they're only over there. Memories of the grappler.
Oh, Lynn Denton, again, a real sweet guy. I mean, a very good worker, in his own right. Came out to Oregon and probably was Don Owens' first official booker. Up to that point, Don Owens didn't have a booker. He'd get together in the dressing room with, the guys that he could depend on to draw money. And he'd say, what are we going to do? And the guys on the card would, put together their ideas and hash out something. And that's what they would go with. But then Don hired Lynn as a booker, and Lynn had good ideas. It was just a period of time in which he now inherited. There was now a commission that allowed no blood, no juice, very strong drug testing, which a lot of the guys that Lynn had wanted to bring in came out and passed couldn't pass the drug screen. And I mean, he was really hampered by what he could do simply with the change in the rules, and that can all be faulted back to Billy Jack, who went down to the commission and had told the commission, oh, these guys are all smoking pot and doing drugs, and you need to drug test them, and they cut themselves with razor blades, and so they didn't have to go too far to find an allegiance. Now, this guy that lobbied and got this commission was a guy that had a run-in with Sandy Barr. The guy was a retired cop from New York and had retired in Oregon. And he, had some boxers. And so Sandy Barr was promoting some boxing too, and other than the wrestling. And so he had a fighter, and he wanted a guy that could do 3 rounds. He said, do you have anybody that can do 3 rounds? And of course, this guy, and the name doesn't come to me at this point, but, oh yeah, I got this guy. And so what happened was the guy was in such bad shape that at the end of 1, they threw in the towel because he was just out of shape. Well, Sandy refused to pay him for a 3-round fight, paid him for less than a 3-round fight. If it would the distance or whatever the guy would have lost, I'm sure he would have paid him. But, this guy gets upset with Sandy, and he's the one that rallies and gets his commissioner, along with the help of Billy Jack. And it was meant to drive Don Owens out of business and promote Billy's thing, but it
backfired.
The commission and killed everybody.
Yeah,
I mean, it not only Billy Jack was dead in the water, but
you went to Florida, I think, as well, and you had a match with David Von Erck at one point.
Probably had more than one with him.
Right.
Can't remember exact incidences in a lot of matches.
Did you ever work for Fritz, or was it?
No,
okay.
Never worked for Fritz. No. The one question I get most likely, and I'm surprised that you haven't brought it up, was, when I came back to the AWA, and I worked with the one Von Erich.
Kerry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he'd had his foot removed, but nobody knew that.
I'm gonna go right to AWA right now.
Oh,
actually.
Okay.
We could talk about AWA. How did you wind up going in AWA? And I'm surprised in the 80s you never went to Vince or Crockett. Was there any interest ever expressed towards you?
I was, like I said, I was in Europe at the time.
Okay.
And I had absolutely no interest. I mean, I was making good money in Europe. I was over there, with my family. I mean, they were taking good care of me.
Okay.
Financially. And I didn't want to go anyplace else. I mean, it's a good deal. You're in the same town for, the shortest period of time is, I think there were some 3-day tournaments. But for the most part, you're there a month. You're there 6 weeks in the same town, same place, same building. And it's easy. You get a chance to work out. You get a chance to, do a lot because you don't have to move.
Right. What were your initial impressions of Vern when you went to AWA? How'd that come about?
I never had any impressions of Vern. I mean, I'd heard, stories and story after story that he was egocentric, and he was. I mean, I'm not gonna tell you that he wasn't. I mean, and I was talking to some people downstairs, how history of wrestling could have very easily have changed. I mean, Hulk Hogan had already worked for Vince Sr. and had his 6 months run and made his $110,000 or $120,000 or whatever it was, and was now working for Vern. And it was a different ballgame because you worked very hard when in that 6 months that you worked for McMahon Sr. Because you were working 8 days in a 7-day week. In other words, you were working 6 days and twice on Sunday.
Right.
Usually an afternoon show and then an evening show. And it was a very hectic schedule. I mean, you're on the road, you're living out of a suitcase. And as far as I know, when Hogan went to Minnesota, he liked it because at Vern's territory, you were working 3 days a week, 4 days a week max. So he had a lot of days off, and he liked that. Yes, it took you a year to make the same money that you could make for, Vince in 6 months, but you had that, that freedom, that ability to have a day off every now and then, or every, 3 days off a week. So my understanding from some of the guys that were there was all that Hogan wanted was the belt. But Vern, you're Bockwinkel, that's it. We're the only champions. And so they wouldn't let him in. And that's what I understand that his decision when Vince called him and said, hey, come out here, this is what we got planned. And he didn't really want to go, but it obviously worked out, to his benefit and to Vince's benefit.
Yeah.
And again, it was to the detriment of the AWA. And again, look at the guys that Hogan took with him. I mean, one of them is right downstairs now, Gene.
Yeah.
He took him with him. He liked him. He liked his interview style. Liked his enthusiasm. So.
Whose idea was it to get you to do the racist gimmick?
No, it was my own. That was my gimmick. I mean, a lot of people said it was a sign. No, it wasn't. I mean, Vince originally wanted me to come out there. Not Vince. Vern, because Don Owens had told him, about the Mega Maharishi and how, but it wouldn't have played.
Yeah.
On a national audience, it wouldn't have played simply because people didn't know what was going on in Oregon unless they really dug through the papers.
Right.
So at that time, South Africa, and I like I said, I've been to South Africa a number of times there to wrestle, and it was on the national media and their coverage and what was going on with apartheid and this and that. So I figured now was the time. I mean, at least I was going to have a national audience to put this before. Right. And so that's what I did it.
What are your memories of your feud with Jimmy Snuka and pile driving him on the concrete?
Memories? I don't know. I mean, again, it was easy money.
Right.
It was immediate, heat. And, to a certain extent, I think that back then people still believed. There was that questioning of doubt in their mind. I mean, I've always looked at, a building full of wrestling fans as, half of them know that it's a work and the other half want to get into the business.
Huh.
And so, they punch each other and, poke each other and say, well, those first two, that was bullshit. But that third one, that'd be real. That was real.
Yeah.
So I think that you could hook them if what you did was believable enough, and make them believe that no way that was fake, man. That was the real deal.
Was Snuka hard to work with?
No, Jimmy. Like I said, I said so earlier. I mean, one of the easiest businessmen. He doesn't have an ego. The bottom line is money, and those are the kind of people that I respect. I mean, I see people that you could pay them $500 a week,
right,
and give them a belt, and they're one happy son of a bitch. Then I've seen guys that I don't need no belts. Give me $1,500 a week, and I'm really happy.
Right.
And so Jimmy was the guy that I don't need a belt. I don't need any glory. Pay me the money. And I think that a lot of your businessmen wrestlers look at it as the bottom line. I mean, a belt, what does that mean? Yeah, you got it in your bag, and you go to the airport, and now you pull it out of your bag. And back then, you had to go through security, and you got the fucking thing, and so now you got to take goddamn a belt. Now you got to take pictures with 5 or 6 fucking marks, which is not a bad thing, but it's just a pain in the ass.
Yeah,
and it's better just to pass on through security and less of a hassle.
Do you think around this time period that Vince had already beaten Vern by then, or?
Well, yes. In all honesty, I think that during a period of time there with myself, Snuka, the Rockers, Rose, we were giving him a run for his money in some of the markets, but we weren't in a lot of his markets. And when we would put on a show, that was going to mean something, then Vince would either come with a loaded card right before or right after.
Right.
So he was doing, his best to head us off at the pass, so to speak. And like I said, he did a damn good job of it. So, he just outfoxed Vern.
You think Vern was out of touch?
Out of touch? Yeah, I think he was out of touch. But he was out of touch because he was egocentric. I mean,
right.
Again, going back to the incident where if he would have given Hulk Hogan the belt, and people could have forgot about Vern, and people could have forgot about Greg, and people could have forgot about Nick. Then again, I don't think Nick had anything to do with it. But again, I think it was oh Jesus Christ, people will forget about me if this big Hulk Hogan gets in here. And that's the way I think he thought.
What are your memories of Nick?
Nick was a good solid worker. I never had any conflict with Nick, and to this day, I mean, he's still a nice fella. A lot of people didn't care for Nick because they felt he was arrogant, and don't forget, I mean, Nick kicked around his business for a number of years,
right,
and had no success. And then when he went to Minneapolis, I think that Vern, he was what Vern was looking for, somebody that could wrestle, was intelligent, give a decent interview, wasn't the run-of-the-mill bum-type wrestler, I guess you would say.
Memories of Greg Gagne.
Greg,
You think he deserved this push, too?
Work-wise, I think Greg was a great worker. The only thing that Greg did wrong was he was born to Vern.
Right.
If he would have been Jimpin' Jim Brunzell instead of Greg Gagne, then I think the people would have accepted him more. But again, they knew that he was getting the push because he was daddy's son, just like, in the Nick Goulas territory when his kid wrestled, for Christ's sake. I mean,
right.
Not that there was any comparison between Nick Goulas' son and Greg Gagne, because one could work and the other guy couldn't. I mean, Greg was a good worker, a good, solid, believable worker. Body-wise, he didn't look the part, but he was athletic and was a good technical worker, good psychological worker, knew what he was doing in the ring, and knew what it did to get the job done. Again, not to be repetitive, but his only downfall was that his last name was Gagne.
Memories of Curt Hennig and Scott Hall.
Oh, again, Curt Hennig, a marvelous kid to work with, nice guy, always a lot of fun to be around. I mean, always ribbon and carrying on and doing all kinds of crazy shit. Just always stirring the shit in the locker room. It's funny because Kurt's no longer with us, and his idol Fuji was here today. Fuji was a very good ribber, of course. Curt, when he would go into one of his little things, he said, "Oh, I wonder what Mr. Fuji do here in this situation. Maybe, and he would always go into that, and you knew some rib was forthcoming, whether it was putting a lock on somebody's bag or on their jeans or on the hood ornament of their car. I mean, Curt was just always stirring the shit. I mean, I remember there was a guy named Kevin Kelly, whom was a big, good-looking kid. Nails, I think he ended up knocking Vince out, and kicking the shit out of Vince because he wasn't happy with things. But Kevin was a volatile kid. I mean, nice kid, but again, could be very on the edge if something happened. And somehow, Adnan El Casey got blamed for putting a lock on Kevin's hood ornament. And next day when the interview started, Kevin just came in and started fucking Adnan, because he thought that Curt had led him to believe that Adnan had done it.
Huh.
So I mean that some of it, Kurt's ribs were they were fun, but they could injure somebody with the same token.
What about Scott Hall?
Scott, when I met him, was again he was green, and we're all green. I mean but I think he was a pretty quick learner. I mean, I worked with him. They're not gonna put any of them matches down as mat classics by any stretch of the imagination. But again, I did the best that I could do with him, and I think he worked the best he could to his ability that he had at the time. I mean, I look back on them, and some of them are on ESPN Classics now, and they weren't great, but they weren't that bad either. I don't, I did the best that I could to teach him, and again, between myself and Rose, we did the best that we could teach Janetti and Michaels.
What do you remember?
At the same time? I to this day, and whether Sean will ever admit it, but every day, that we were home in Minneapolis, Sean would come from the gym and he'd have his bag of Burger King, and he would sit there and he would, pick our brain. Well, what do you do in this situation? What do we do in this situation? How do I react to this? What should I do here? He won and he learned. Not only did he learn, but he learned the political aspect of the business as well as the psychological aspect, the physical, the physical aspect he already had down. He was terribly athletic and had the gymnastic ability to do all the stuff. But again, he just lacked that final polish, and I can't help but believe that all that time that he spent with me and Rose there, and his bag of Burger King burgers, that it helped him become one of the great workers of all time, as far as I'm concerned.
What about Baron Von Raschke? Was it hard working with some of the older veterans and keeping your heat?
Yeah, because again, they were older. They couldn't work. It was like me on my latter days. I felt sorry for the poor bastards that had to try to drag my, wrinkled ass up off the mat. Baron was over as a babyface, but to get any sympathy on him or to get any heat on him, but that was tough. I'll go back to the old statement by Stan Hansen, whom that was a very interesting incident that happened in the AWA. Stan was the AWA champion which I think he'd taken off Martel, and because Martel was going back to New York,
Right.
going to New York, and so Stan was the champion. And so anyway, this is when I first came there, and so he was a champion. He was a champion. I think they gave it back to Nick, then he won it from Nick, and so anyway, they're doing interviews, and Bockwinkel is standing there as the world champion. And I look and I say, Jesus Christ, this is, I don't know if Stan's going to drop the belt. I don't know anything about that. And so when Stan flew into Denver, I said, oh, are you dropping the belt tonight? What are you talking about? I said, well, we just listened to an interview that you're dropping the belt and that, Bockwinkel's going to be they didn't tell me nothing about that. And that ain't going to fucking happen unless I say it's going to happen. I said, probably, you can do what you want to, Stan. And so,
we were just with Stan actually last week and we talked about it. Go ahead.
No.
This is good.
And so anyway, they sat down there and they were all screaming at each other back and forth there in the office. And, but Stan, this and that. Now, I got this thing. I'm doing it in Japan. And I'll come back and be happy to drop it. But I got a big thing on the line here, and I ain't doing it. And that's that. And he just walked out.
All right.
That was the end of the conversation. But again, that wasn't handled correctly. If whatever the reason was, if they wanted the belt back on Bockwinkel, come to me and tell me, or come to Stan, and I'm sure he would have been saying, okay, I'll be happy to do that whenever you want me to do it, but thank you for letting me know ahead of time. And like I say, Stan's professional enough that I'm sure he would have done it.
You also got to work with Wahoo at WrestleRock, and what are your memories of that?
Wahoo was just back in, into the AWA, and basically Wahoo was looking for his last big run. So to me, and again, just reviewing the match, and I've done so within the last couple of weeks, he was trying to get over how tough he was, and I was just trying to get over, period. I mean,
right.
I just got into the territory, and I'm trying to get over, and he's trying to get over, and basically he was trying to out-heel me in that particular match at WrestleRock, and that's probably why it didn't gel. Later on, we had considerably better matches. Once he understood where I was coming from, and I understood where he was coming from, and we worked together for the betterment of the territory. But that was, believe me, no Matt Classic in my estimation. I mean, it was a tough physical contest, as you can, probably if you've seen the tape, you can attest to. I mean, working with Wahoo was not a night off by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I guarantee you're going to come out of there with welts and bumps and bruises, and it's just the kind of a worker that Wahoo was. And again, nothing against that work, that style, as long as it's give and take. Well, you give it to me, I'll give it right back, and we're both happy. It's where you want to give, but you don't want to take.
Mm-hmm. Did Vern lose his shirt on WrestleRock? Did he lose a lot of money?
I don't know. I don't think he lost money on WrestleRock.
Okay.
I really don't think that he lost money at all. I mean, it wasn't sold out. And Waylon Jennings, I sure cost him a lot of money, but no, I don't think he lost money. In fact, my payoff was, I think, pretty fair considering, the amount of talent he had on there.
What was your payoff for that?
You know what? I'd have to look back at my book, and I don't remember. But I think it was over $1,000, maybe $1,200, $1,250. Which, and like I said, I was just, a curtain jerker. I wasn't figured into any kind of main event. I think it was the first or second match on the card, third match maybe. I don't know. Exactly.
You also got to work with Sergeant Slaughter back then. And
yeah.
Was Sergeant Cruise Control back then?
Well, was he on cruise control? I don't know. No, I'm not going to say he was on cruise control. I mean, Sarge, again, was out at that point for Sarge.
Right.
He wasn't interested in as Piper became known later on. I don't want to lose. I can't lose. I'm that big a star. I can't drop a fall, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. So I as long as Sarge was going over, everything was happy. And again, I never beat him, so I don't know. You know, I mean, he always in every contest I had with him, I think he was going over. So in that case, I you know, when you're going over, and back then you're going over. Okay, I get 90% of the match, you get to finish. In other words, 90% is on my side. You get to finish, and another 10%. You get that other 10% simply because we got to tell a story.
Was there ever any talk about putting the belt on you at all?
Shit, no, nobody trusted me that much. Not any belts.
Right.
No, I've had belts, but again, like I said in the past, belts don't mean shit to me. It's just extra weight in your bag. It just means that it's your job as a champion that just means that you're the best jobber in the territory. You're the best talented answer that we have. I mean, if you look back at some of the former NWA champions, Dory Funk, Jack Briscoe, they were the best jobbers at that time. In other words, they made your local champion look like $1 million, and all that happened was they either went 60-minute Broadway or they slept on a banana peel in the waning minutes of a 60-minute contest. But they were beating the shit out of the world champion up to that point, and by God, next time he'll get him. You know, that was the way people came away thinking, and that was the thinking at the time.
Why did you end up leaving AWA?
The first time was over money.
Right.
We had a very big house in the Cow Palace. The main event was myself and Snuka. It was sold out, and I did not get a good payoff. And I went to Vern Gagne and I said, you know, this is a shit payoff. I said, I want what is right. Well, I can't do this, and I couldn't pay, you know, like I wanted to pay because I had to take care of everybody on the card. And I looked at him and said, Vern, I said, when Bockwinkel and fucking Zbyszko were playing empty houses, I didn't see no being taken care of on my end.
Right.
I said, so when I put asses in the seat, I expect to be paid. And I told him, I said, I'm going to be in on Friday. And this was on Wednesday. And I said, I'll expect a check, a difference in the amount. And when I went in on check, Vern wasn't there. When I went in on Friday, I said, is there a check here for me? No, there's no check here for you. I said, thank you very much. Thank Mr. Gagne, you know, in his absence for the opportunity to work for him. But I'd already set it up where I was going to go across town, and some guy that had a hookup with Schmid Beer was going to pay me $1,500 just to come out and wave at the crowd. And, you know, I've made the move. I'm no longer working for Vern, and I'm a free agent.
Are you surprised that Vince never picked you up around this period of time?
Like I said, I don't know what the reasoning was. Vince either didn't like the gimmick, didn't like me personally.
Right.
You know, to me, I've had a career. I'm not as wealthy as Hulk Hogan. I'm not as wealthy as a lot of guys. I'm comfortable.
Right.
You know, I'm not going to have to worry about my next dollar, and so I mean, you know, I got my little monthly benefits that I get. You know, dividend interest off my investments, and so I'm not going to be living in Hawaii anytime soon. Right. But again, you know, I can afford to take 3 or 4 vacations a year, and pretty much, you know, not have to worry about my next meal or you know, my next bill, so to speak.
Any good Herb Abrams stories? Because you went to work for Herb.
Herb was a funny guy. I mean, a very, very strange little fella.
Yeah.
And by all practical purposes, as far as I was concerned, a nice guy. I think that if I had to fault him, I mean, he had a weakness for cocaine and titty bars. You know, between the two of them, I'd go to the titty bars with him as long as he was buying the drinks,
right? You
know, and the lap dances and all the shit that went along with it. But you know, those weren't places that I chose to frequent, and not because I didn't like women. It's just that,
right? You
know, they're in the business and I'm in the business, and we're both in the same business of
working
sports entertainment and working the fucking crowd. So the only disagreement I ever had with her was I had worked this little angle up with a black referee, And it was to where at first I refused to let him referee my matches.
Right.
And then it builds up to where they end up, he is refereeing the matches. And I think I was working with David Sammartino when we do the angle, and the referee does something and gets knocked down. Oh, yeah, David scoop slams me, my feet hit the referee, knock him down. And after that, he gets the 3 count because the referee's knocked down. And anyway, so I kicked the shit out of the referee. Now, I was supposed to come back with the referee. We had it all built up where, his mother comes out and supposed to, Colonel Debeers, please.
Right.
My son wants to wrestle you so bad, but he got a head injury, and that's why he's a referee and not a wrestler. Please, And to build up for the pay-per-view. But somehow Herb got, the shaky asshole about the thing. And for no reason at all, they throw me in a strap match against Paul Orndorff. Why? I have no idea. It didn't mean diddly shit. It was just thrown in as an attempt to draw money.
Who was his booker?
Down in, I think it was Brian Blair at the time.
Okay.
But I don't think Brian had it, because I talked to Brian. I said, why aren't we carrying forward with this? Well, Herb don't want to. He's afraid of the angle. He don't want to do it. So, again, why did we spend all that time if, Herb was going to get the cold willy there,
right?
Building this thing up, and then why have a match with Paul Orndorff, which doesn't amount to a row of shit. And then on top of that, there was the kid that's dead now.
Louis Piccoli?
No, he wasn't. I don't think he was on the card. Christ. The Road Warriors brother. He was
John
Babyface on
Laurinaitis?
the card, and the big kid from down south.
I know Terminator, and then there was Johnny Ace.
Johnny Ace was,
Right.
was the babyface in the match, and shit, I can still see him. He went goofy on pills and messed himself up. From down south, good worker, big kid.
Trying to think. Did he ever work in New York?
He was Haynes. Him and Haynes were teamed up for
Terry Gordy.
Yeah, Terry Gordy.
Yeah.
They had a match before, and they went over the, pay-per-view, you got limited time and you got to keep it in the time frame. But they went over and were all over the goddamn building beating the shit out of each other. And so it comes down to mine and Orndorff's match, and what was supposed to have been a 12-minute time limit, turns into like a 5-minute slot. Got to get it all in here in 5 or 6 minutes. Now we've got to hustle everything up, and no chance to really get a story developed. But no, I guess working 5 minutes and it pays the same as working for 6 minutes or 12 minutes. It all pays the same. And the funny thing about that was that Herb was a little shaky on the payoffs. You work for him, you get a check, you take the check to the bank, the check would bounce. You'd get a letter from the bank stating, Mr. Abrams' check was returned in error. Please redeposit it. There are sufficient funds to cover, a form letter. And so that was the first check. Second check, the letter came before the check came back.
Wow.
And so when it came to, after that, I just told Herb, I said, Herb, we need to, do this on a cash basis. I said, my bank's not understanding this, and I don't like to do this. And so the evening of the pay-per-view, it ill-fated. It didn't draw diddly squat there.
This is one in Vegas, right?
No, this is the one in Manatee,
okay.
Manatee Center in Florida.
Right, with Cactus.
And I think Orton Jr. and I had met, and we were going to the building, and we stopped in at Albertsons. And I bought some, instant grits, some flavored grits, because I like grits. You can't get them where I'm from. And anyway, the manager recognized me and Orton. Hey, what are you doing? Yada, yada. And I said, I'm getting a check tonight. I said, I'd like to get it cashed. Could I come back after the show? Oh, yeah. He said, no problem. Well, again, I went back, cashed the check. And the guy gave me my payoff.
Right.
I think it was $750, which bounced. A lot of guys didn't get their money, but I got mine because Joe Albertson ate the check.
Wow.
But
did you ever get any heat from any black wrestlers over your gimmick or no? No. Okay.
no, they understood. They understood the gimmick, and what it was all about. I mean, like I said, the bottom guys that were the Derek Dukes and those type of guys. I mean, it was an opportunity for them to work with me because they got national exposure, for Christ's sake. I mean, Derek Dukes was a nobody, and then when we did the gimmick with him, I mean, he was a decent worker, but he just needed the best part brought out in him, and so it helped make him somewhat of a star.
Memories of the Team Challenge with Jake Millman.
Oh my God!
And who was booking at the time of that?
Believe me, I don't know. I think it was Greg Gagne.
Okay.
I'm almost sure. Now, again, the concept, I think maybe it was ahead of its time. I don't know. I mean, you got two different divisions now of the WWE. You got the Raw and you got the SmackDown, or whatever the two different programs are cost, and they intermingle and this and that kind of thing. I mean, if it would have been well thought out, it possibly could have been a lot more interesting than it was. I had nothing to do with it.
Right.
I was getting the paycheck. What do you want done? I'll do it. Just pay me.
I think they did the Great American Turkey Hunt as well.
Oh yeah. Now, I don't know if that was part of the team challenge. That was
it was ridiculous.
It was just a gimmick match. And I remember that Vern was on his last legs then. I mean, he couldn't even afford to. He first of all tried to sell ESPN the blue background. In other words, you filmed your matches in a ring, but the studio was all blue behind it, and they went down to the Metrodome and had photographed these sellouts of a truck pull or giant monster trucks or whatever, and they got all this footage from the monster trucks, not the monster trucks themselves, but the crowd. And so that was put in the
chroma key.
Whatever the chroma key was. And so, I mean, it didn't, from the ring angle, it didn't look too bad. But when it showed you coming out and you're going and the people got no dimension, when you're entering the ring, that was pretty fucking hokey.
Huh.
And ESPN said, we ain't buying it, and that's that. So then, they for a brief period of time there, they went, they some excuse that Zbyszko was involved in matches, and we were going to do studio shoots only, no live matches. And it was just a thing that, he couldn't afford to go to Vegas. He lost Vegas, couldn't afford to go to Rochester. We could and rent that building down there. So now we're reduced to doing matches in a studio. And that's where the great turkey match came about. Was Greg Gagne's little thing. It was around Thanksgiving, and it was a hokey thing. But it became a little bit of a Mac classic in the Minneapolis area. That always people would request it to be shown right around Thanksgiving. Hokier and shit, but
memories of DDP.
Diamond Dallas Page again. Dallas was my manager, which I didn't really need, but they assigned him to me, and it kind of like me being Debeers and him being the Diamond Exchange or whatever his gimmick was. It seemed like a natural fit, but I never cared to work with a manager because I didn't want half of my heat going with him.
Yeah,
and I just never could quite figure out Dallas's angle. He's a manager, and then he becomes a worker, and my understanding was that he had a couple of very successful nightclubs in Florida before he ever got involved in the business. And, my goal is to save enough money to get a couple successful nightclubs in Florida, and he's going backwards. I don't know. I mean, why would somebody want to, get involved and get your body all beat up if you can stand there and just talk and take a bump, once every 2 or 3 weeks, when it's time to get to the manager, rather than to beat your body up every day and become crippled. I don't understand that mentality. But again, hindsight's 20/20, I guess.
You opened up a wrestling school with Buddy Rose eventually after you left the business. You kind of left the business just because it was time to go?
I left the business because, the business was done with me. I mean, I'm under no illusions. I mean, I was getting old. I didn't no longer care to, take, the dangerous bumps. And I don't care, no longer care to work with people that you didn't know how the fuck they were going to treat your body. I mean,
Right.
I just come through a period of time where guys had a respect for each other. We enter into this contest. I'm giving you my body. Take good care of it. You're giving me your body. I'm going to take good care of it. And you're going into an era where God only knows what kind of windmill you're going to have to fight or what kind of jackhammer you're going to have to work with. I was able to, pretty much control those ends of things. And if I couldn't control it, I just told him, I said, hey, I'm going to tell you, I'm at the age where you fucking hurt me. You'll be in the ring by yourself.
Right.
And you can explain to the promoter why I'm not there.
You opened up a kiddie farm.
You better fucking be sure I'm going to tell him why I'm no longer there.
Huh.
Kind of reminds me of a story. And I told my students that. I said, if you get a guy that want to work with you, get out, grab the mic and say, ladies and gentlemen, he's entirely too tough for me this evening. He is the winner. And I said, and I actually had a couple students that did that. I mean, they try to work with guys, on shows and they wouldn't work. You just step outside. He's too tough for me tonight. He can work by himself, And so I got a kick out of that. That they actually listened to it. And I forgot what the original question was. But the reason I got involved, and it wasn't that I wanted to be involved with a wrestling school because I didn't go to a wrestling school per se.
Right.
I joined in the old boy network. In other words, we'll help you, and it's kind of like a fraternity. There was no big money fee paid to learn from anybody. It was just they would teach you. We will help you. And so I didn't like the way the wrestling schools were run. They were run, number one, by greedy people that didn't know shit about the business anyway. In other words,
right.
So I did jobs for WWF, and now that qualifies me to be a teacher. No, it doesn't qualify you to be a teacher. It doesn't qualify you to charge somebody $5,000 and then you take them in there and beat the shit out of them.
Get them to quit.
And get them to quit. And now we end up with 3 guys, but I got 5 guys, $5,000, and that's the way you run your business. No, I think that it's got to be a two-way street. And in the fact that, yes, in my wrestling school, I had guys that could make it in the business, guys that are still in the business. And I also had schlocks that no matter what I did with them or to them, they're never going to be in the business.
Right.
But they're what I like to call sweat smellers. They're around the business and they smell the sweat of real workers, and that's for them, and they'll buy a fucking pay-per-view or buy a ticket the rest of their life to an event. Right. But you're never going to be a wrestler. But I got to have those people so the other people I can teach. I'm not going to go there for nothing.
Right.
Even to teach, the most qualified people. I mean, I love the business. I like the business. And I'm willing to teach the business. But what I'm not willing to do is to do it for free. And again, where the wrestling school, all came about was because myself and Buddy Rose were approached to help put together and to book a show and a possible promotion. And so, and again, being, disconnected and not knowing, who the local workers were, I only knew of, a couple of guys that, could be at least a main event. Brian Alvarez was one, and a guy named Buddy Wayne was another one. And so I said, where the fuck do we go? I need guys that can work. I said, I got to fill out the card. Show me some guys. Well,
Brian is the writer for The Observer, right?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I have respect for him because he's been in the ring. I have no respect for Meltzer because he's a piece of fucking shit that, all his claim to fame was he became a wealthy man off sucking information out of guys that were in the dressing room who wanted to give away the fucking secrets to the business. And that's just my feeling. I at least have some respect for Brian Alvarez because he's been down the road. He knows what it takes to get in the fucking ring. He knows what it takes to put on a match. And so I do have some respect for him. Meltzer, I don't know, he's now jumped on another bandwagon with the MMA. And so he's very fortunate in, he's where he should be all the time. And when he's not, he's with somebody else's wife. I don't know. But that enough said about that. And we were talking about, anyway, so we get asked to put a card together. And other than the main event, I mean, I was so embarrassed by the first match, second match, third match, fourth match. Like I was so embarrassed that my name was even associated with it. And Buddy Rose said, fuck, he said, maybe we could start a school. I mean, just to at least develop enough talent, to be able to, get some shit rolling locally. And so that's how the school came about. It wasn't a need for money, and it wasn't, at least on my part, it was just trying to, associate myself with something that was decent, or, that I didn't have to put my head down and say, oh my God, where did this come from? Or where did that match come from? And that's basically how it started. And I think out of the school, I think we had a total of 6 guys that had WWE tryouts, and they were only interested in one of them. And it was a guy with a good body. They used him on a couple of, used him for a couple of squash jobs.
Right.
But at least, hey, the guy, had his claim to fame, and even if the developmental contract had come and offered to him at that time, I think that he makes like $35 an hour, and he's works for some water purification with the state, and so I don't think he'd leave his job anyway, to go take a pig in a poke down at some developmental school.
Is it true you own a kitten farm too?
The what?
A kitten farm?
No, somebody else said that was somebody that had started that rumor, put it up on one of the message boards.
Okay.
No, it's somebody just bullshit. Okay. I don't have a kitten farm.
Man.
I got an interior design business that I'm a 1/3 owner of. I mean, we sell furniture, and my end of it, I don't have to do any interior design. All I do is if I got to uncrate the furniture when it comes in, I put it up on the website for sale, and like I say, I own 1/3 of the business, and my balls are in the vice now because we just expanded after being in business for 4 years. And, I'm just hoping that the rich people keep getting richer because that's our clientele. I mean, we're not, our stuff doesn't appeal to the middle of the road or the Walmart shopper, or it's an upper end store and upper end interior design stuff. So,
you still watch the business today too?
Do I?
Yeah.
Like I said, the other night I went to, I got an opportunity. I got a call. Somebody wanted me to, come to the Rose Garden for the pay-per-view, and all I had to do was to get $250 was to go in there and sit there and watch the matches and bring, some autograph pictures and shake people's hand. And so, I'll do it. I mean, to that extent, I will involve myself with a business if I can make $250. Yeah. Do I watch it on a regular basis? No, I don't.
Do you watch UFC or MMA?
Did I watch what?
UFC or MMA?
If it catches my fancy and it's a free one, I'm not gonna buy a pay-per-view. I think FX, has some of that stuff on. But if I happen to tune in and I don't like what's on the other channels, then I'll watch it.
Out of all the deaths in wrestling, has any really hit you the hardest?
Yeah, I think each and every one of them, takes a certain bite out of you, and and you try to go back and second guess things and wonder why, and again, if you look at the number of deaths, maybe, and compared it to the run of the mill population for the types of deaths that they are, maybe there is no significant number. But when you think of a big healthy guy, who appears healthy in all aspects, and lays down to take a nap and wakes up dead, it does. It puts some doubt in your mind as to what they did or what they, should have done or shouldn't have done. But again, anyone significant, I think just over the whole, it just happens to be guys that you worked with and, you knew and were aware of. In a regular job, it could be the same thing. If you're an accountant and, the accountant down the street dies, well, fuck, I'm sorry to hear that. Maybe I can get some of his clients. And that's kind of the way that wrestlers used to think. Oh, he died? Oh, shit, maybe I can get his spot.
Wow.
Or maybe I can buy his shoes cheap. Maybe I'll get a deal on his shoes. But, and again, a lot of it was in jest. But again, there was some sympathy there too.
Is there anything that you want to say that you never had a chance to say to anybody out there watching this?
Oh, anything I want to say is, like I said, I don't have an axe to grind. I'm not going to humble anybody. I'm not going to break your back and fuck you up your ass. I don't have anybody that I want to see that happen to. Sure, I mean, a lot of times when you had these long, god awful road trips, and you'd sit there with a car full of wrestlers drinking beer, and you'd be very bitter over the way a promoter fucked you or about something, and we'd put him on your dead list. And if I get a fucking serious fatal illness, I'm gonna go shoot that son of a bitch. I'm gonna take him out with me.
Right.
And all wrestlers had had that kind of a list. A lot of that list took care of itself in the form of retribution. I mean, some of the evil promoters, had their own problems in life.
Right.
Whether it was an ill wife that hang on for a number of years, or a queer son, or
right.
a fucked up kid, or So they basically, a lot of that retribution happened. So it wasn't necessary for me to carry that hate and go forward with it. I've got people I'd rather not be around, and I no longer have to be around them. But again, in this business, you have people that you respect and people that you got no respect for. But the fact is, if you're a professional, you'll still work with that person, putting your personal feelings, aside for the purpose of the promotion, or basically for the purpose of making money. I mean, there's been a lot of guys that I never cared for, and I didn't spend any time with them. I didn't have to go with them or ride with them or do anything like that. I just had to go out and do my little shtick with them.
Right.
Thank you very much. Nice match. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. We'll work again sometime. And that was the extent of it. Again, I didn't have to go drink a beer with him. I didn't have to like him. I didn't have to like his family. I didn't like his wife. So an axe to grind. There are people that, I still, for some reason, they still don't care for to this day. Is there any point in me raising my blood pressure up to think about them? No, not really. Am I bitter about anything? No, not really. I'm not going to be a Billy Jack and look at hindsight and try to put my failures onto somebody else. Billy Jack basically made his own bed. And again, I'm sorry for the position that he's in, and I feel bad for him. But there's only one reason he's there, and I didn't have any cause in it.
Right.
It was basically self-inflicted, and I think a lot of guys that happens to, in the end, it is basically self-inflicted. So, all in all, like I said, it's been a great career as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I'm not Hulk Hogan, but I ain't Joe Schmo either. I mean, I'm somewhere in the middle. And I guess one of the things that, if I got a real piss and moan about, is, there's these Hall of Fames and all this bullshit. And to me, the guys that should be in the Hall of Fame are the fucking Joe Schmoes and the guys that put you over to get you into the position that where you drew that money that, put your ass and caused you to fart through silk. But how easy it is for those guys that are farting through the silk to forget about the fucking guy that laid their body on the line to put them in the position that they're in. And I think that if anything grates me, it would be somebody that would have that kind of attitude. Well, I drew all this money, or I did all these wonderful things, and I put all these asses in the seats, and I was this champion, and I was that. No, you were there because somebody put your ass over and put you in that position. Maybe you kissed the fat man's ass. Maybe you brought donuts to the office. I don't know exactly what you did do to get into the position to where you felt that you were better than somebody else on the card. And I only want to say this about one thing, and I don't give a shit who the guy is. If they put your name on the fucking marquee and yours alone, and you didn't have an opponent, how many asses would you put into those seats? If you didn't have an adversary, how great would you be? And if you didn't have that adversary to make you look good and to put you over, how great would you be? That's it. I mean, people have been working since the Christians and the Lions and the Olympics, for Christ's sake. I mean, it's a known fact that even in the Olympics, things were worked. This guy had more charisma, or we needed to build this king up, and the king would give people money to put him over in wrestling matches in the Olympics, for Christ's sake. So it's been going on for years, but just learn one thing, that, it is a work, and it's no more than that, and it's no less than that.
Thanks for being here today. It was a great interview.
Okay.
TitleMatchNetwork.com